Good evening, everyone. Nice to see you guys. I see some familiar faces out there. My name is Hilary Graves, and I'm joined tonight by two good friends who I have had the pleasure of partnering with on various investment properties in the Southeast. And I would say I didn't ask them a specific number, but I think between us, we probably own a couple thousand units of real estate, which is crazy. But we have racked up a bit of experience to speak from on tonight's topic, and we're excited to talk about active versus passive investing and which one wins. We have three very different backgrounds. We come from three different states. I'm from Pennsylvania. Shannon, tell us a little bit about where you're from.
I live in the fabulous state of New Jersey. I'm about 14 miles outside of New York City.
Incredible. And Ian,
Charleston, South Carolina,
Where all the cool kids are from.
where all the cool kids are from. That's right.
actually, yeah, a little jealous every time I hear you say that, but also jealous of Shannon, who the other day said, I'm just going to pop into New York City today with my husband and just kind of putz around. I was like, oh man, that's cool. Um, but yeah, so what we do have in common though is that we all started investing in real estate with some very active pursuits and have over time found more passive opportunities, more and more of those. And I mean the truly passive type. And we're going to talk about that later. Though through some irony, we have found ourselves on the active side of some multifamily syndications where we partner and then bring in passive investors. So that's just something we love to do and serving our investors and partners. And honestly, it's kind of the best of both worlds for us. You may have heard on mainstream media and maybe even from some actual people that investing in real estate is a way of earning passive income, and that word is kind of thrown around. Um, but I say not all investments are created equal, not even close, actually. And some real estate tactics are completely passive and require almost no work, but some are basically a full-time job. So I think it's fair to say that some of the investments that we've done are right for some people and definitely not at all for others. And if you ever hear somebody say, I think I want to earn some passive income, I'm going to do a couple flips. I mean, just know that that is not that's not passive at all. That's something we're going to talk about. But maybe the question for you will be like, what's right for me, and also what's entailed in each one. And of course, there's no right answer to what you'd like to do and what you choose to invest in. But it's good to kind of know the scale of how active and how passive some of these investments actually are. And what we're going to do is actually rank them for you from our opinion of where they fall on that scale. And then we're going to speak to what is involved in actually finding some of these deals, finding an investment where the numbers actually work. And then once you find it, what's involved in the process of holding the property or maybe selling the property, finding tenants, and everything that's involved after that, because obviously it doesn't just stop when you purchase the property. The real work often begins right after you purchase the property. So I'm going to share my screen. All right. So active versus passive real estate investing, which one wins? I'm going to start actually with probably the most well-known, I think, which is buy and hold long-term rentals. And I think we all own a bunch of these, maybe have sold some by now, but certainly have gone through the process of finding buy and hold rentals. And, and in my opinion, I'm putting this at number two, between passive and active. Passive being the completely passive being number one, and then very active being number five. I put it at a high two. Um, and that's just because the beginning process of it, in my experience, has been maybe labor intensive, as far as finding a deal, maybe analyzing a lot of deals, and maybe you're even renovating. I That's what we did. We renovated all of our properties, and we even we even swung a hammer ourselves. So my husband did most of that, but we did a lot of those ourselves. Obviously, that's a lot of work. But then once you stabilize it, once you get tenants in there, which also can be a lot of work too, to be honest. But once you get them in there, and that first maybe couple weeks, couple months, however long it takes you, once that period has kind of calmed down and you're just now you just have tenants, I find that to be fairly passive at that point. We're sometimes back and forth with our tenants about things and things break. But if you find good tenants and you have a good system for finding tenants that are qualified and have the income and the credit score and no criminal background history and all of that, it tends to be fairly passive at that point. So I'd like to turn it over to my friends. What do you guys think about that?
I'm gonna see your two and bump you one.
Mm.
And I own a decent amount of long-term rentals. There was a point in my life where I sold almost all of them because they weren't as passive as I wanted, and I just sort of got fed up, and it's fine. I love real estate, as you know, in all its shapes and forms. I just think it's a little less passive than a two because in addition to everything you said, you can sometimes get them stabilized. For me, there's a couple of other factors that make me have that more like a three. There's always a slightly higher worry factor because if you say that an average lease is 12 months, at about 8 months, you have to start worrying, thinking, deciding, jockeying, negotiating. When are you going to speak to them? Are they going to stay? Yes, if you get a longer term lease, maybe that could edge down. But if you get a longer term lease, then you're really not as able to take advantage of inflation because you want to be able to take advantage of inflation. And this is something that's, I think, really important that people don't always think about so much. If you own a long-term property and you have a mortgage, let's just say you have a mortgage on 70% of that. The beautiful thing is that mortgage is a hedge against inflation because you get to pay off that mortgage in today's dollars, even if you hold that property for 10 years. So your $3,000 a month mortgage today in 10 years is still $3,000, but inflation has made that $3,000 maybe worth only $2,400. But here's the thing. If you take long-term leases, you're not able to take advantage of inflation on the other side and know that you're going to be able to increase your rent. So there's constantly this interplay, this worry, this jockeying between wanting the security of a long-term lease and knowing that that's actually costing you the ability to have the lease price go up every year. So for me, it's a little bit higher on the active scale. That's my vote.
I'll take that.
Mm.
I'll take that. What say you, Ian?
Interesting take. Shannon, I love the point you make on the fixed rate debt being a hedge against inflation. It was a couple of years before I looked at it as such. And yeah, my initial thought on buy and hold long-term rentals is I would say, I mean, I got started here like so many folks in 2011, and it was a townhouse I purchased for $154,000. And, had I held on to it, man, the cash flow really would have been something. And I actually have a portfolio of 8 single family rentals that I purchased. Um, across 2022, and I'm in the process of slowly liquidating those because it is a little bit more towards the active side. But I think for getting my feet wet, I do appreciate the closer to passive side of the long-term rental. Um, but I think gone forever are the days of making the numbers work like they did on my very first rental back in 2011. So got my feet wet. I would say it was a two-ish. So maybe I'm with Hilary. But I took a very conservative approach to my numbers, was not very aggressive, and just made sure I got think I had my first tenant ended up being maybe a 2.5 year tenant. So it was very little work, and it was a new construction property. So, which later became a strategy for me moving forward. I think it's a little less headache and a little bit more involvement in terms of fixing things. So,
I'd like to have a little bit of a rebuttal on this one.
mm,
The other problem for me with this strategy, although as I said, I have some, is any individual unit, you are 100% at risk of that tenant leaving, that tenant not paying. I happen to live in a state that's a little bit more tenant friendly than it is landlord friendly, which is something that you may be stuck with if you are buying a property to buy and hold. 90% of the people that I know that do that buy it somewhere close to where they live because it's easiest for them to manage. So if you do that close to where you live, you are captive of whatever landlord tenant laws are in your location. So you're 100% at risk for any one person paying you versus some of the kinds of deals that we've done with our syndicated deals. If you have 200 units, any one, two, three, four, even five people who on any given month run into life problems, health problems, whatever the case may be, that's such a small percentage of the entire mortgage payment per month. And so that's not exactly in the passive active conversation, but if we're kind of comparing like a buy and a hold versus things that are completely more passive, each unit you own, you are 100% at risk by the whatever happens with the tenants that live in that property.
Yeah, that's good. There's not only an active passive conversation on each of these, there's also bang for your buck conversation
And risk.
and risk, yeah, and worry.
Because to me,
Yeah,
the most active thing is worry, right?
that's true. That's true. Um, but I guess the difference might be how much we worry about our long-term rentals.
Right.
Um,
So
but yeah, so I'm enjoying the conversation so far. I am going to move on to our next strategy, which is short-term rentals, and also have a few of these. Um, to me, these are more fun than I thought they were going to be. I'll be honest, but also more work than I thought they were going to be. We have we've furnished a couple units already, and put them on our Airbnb, Verbo, and all of those things. And if you don't have a VA, a virtual assistant who's taking care of the communication, that can be overwhelming, just how much you have to communicate. And so that's one factor in short-term rentals is you've got this whole beast. This is not a long-term tenant. This is somebody who's coming for 2 days on a weekend, and then another person's coming. You're communicating with a cleaner. It's a whole business. Finding a deal is kind of similar in my experience to finding a buy and hold deal. I mean, you might be looking on the MLS, multiple listing service, for those of you who don't use that. You might just be looking on Zillow. Some people look for deals on Zillow. Maybe you're using a realtor to look for some of these, or maybe you're putting out mailers and doing like a mass mail campaign. You can't just, if you're doing that, and I know a lot of people who do this full-time short-term rentals or full-time buy and hold, or full-time flip. They can't just do that once or twice. Like, this is a very ongoing process of trying to find deals and constantly keeping the deal flow. So that is a huge factor in this one, but then the managing is also a huge factor. So that's why I'm putting it at a 4. The only reason I didn't put it as at a 5 is because I wanted to put something else there that was even more. But yeah, this is no joke. Like, it's definitely a job to own a short-term rental. But what do you guys think?
Ian,
all
what do
right,
you say?
I'll dive in. I'm gonna tell you true story. As soon as you put this slide up, I think my blood pressure spiked. I This one really rings true to me. And the reason why is because going back right before I met you fine ladies that are now my business partners, going back to beginning of 2021, I was self-managing six of these in this market, and also was having a really busy career in real estate sales. And someone much wiser than myself forced me to sit down and actually look back at 90 days and how much time I was spending dealing with these short-term rentals. A lot of tenants, a lot of termites, a lot of toilets, a lot of turnover. They were cash flowing well, especially the ones I had bought, 6, 7 years before. But this person said, how much time are you spending dealing with these short-term rentals versus how much are you making when you're spending time on your sales career? And the hourly rate was staggering. So it was actually at this time when I decided to pursue more uh, real estate deals that were on the passive side because financially, it just didn't make sense. And yeah, that was a tough time. 2021 was rough.
Sorry to bring that memory back up.
Hey, it worked out. Luckily, we were all riding the appreciation wave, but it caused me to redistribute my investment strategy, shall we say.
So as you guys know, I'm involved. I'm older than both of you, and I'm very involved in real estate on so many levels. I don't touch short-term rentals with a 10-foot pole.
Mm.
And I don't have any judgment against anyone that does, but let me tell you why I don't. Number one, all the things you just said, Ian, I think dollar per hour, there are a lot of other things I'd rather do. Number two, as we all know, in many parts of the country, and in fact, the world, this is going on in Europe on a massive scale, because there is a shortage of inventory for people to live in, regular people, not vacations or people looking for short-term rentals. We all know that in many parts of the country, that housing shortage has caused home prices to spike. It is a problem for a lot of people. So local governments, municipalities, state governments, etc., are under pressure to try to fix that. And one of the things they can do to make rental prices more affordable is change the laws and the regulations around short-term rentals. So, irrespective of where someone falls on that politically, there is pressure, and none of us can see around the corner. There is pressure for local municipalities to change the short-term rental laws. So I think it's a very risky strategy because you don't know. Right now, people that have short-term rentals in a lot of cases are cash flowing nicely, but you don't know what's around the corner. So I would say to someone, if you're thinking at all about playing the short-term rental strategy, number one, don't even think about it unless a regular buy and hold in that same property cash flows enough that you're happy to own it. So if you want to play the game for a little while and do short-term rentals, great. But just know that could go away. And if it goes away, make sure you're happy to own it at whatever the amount of a regular long-term rental would be. That's number one. Number two, for me personally, I think a lot about what I call noise in real estate. And I like to take long vacations. I like to have peace and quiet to do the things in my life that are important to myself and my family. So I like to look for things where the noise level is at a minimum. I don't know of anything noisier than a short-term rental. It's basically like turning over your tenants every week, every 3 days, every 5 days, whatever it is. So if that's your passion, great. I mean, Hilary, you said you had fun with it, and I know there are other young people like yourself that think it's fun. But if people are attracted to this webinar because they're really wanting to explore active and passive, if passive is at all interesting to you and the peace and quiet of mailbox money, I would say possibly steer away from short-term rentals.
I hear you, girl. And I'm a little strange. I like to furnish things. It's very
I
weird.
get that. A lot of people have
I
that addiction.
I love that part of it.
It's creative.
Yeah, and I had been wanting to do that. So it just kind of, you know, it helped that need that I had for for a moment there. But I also definitely hear your point. It's risky, and in my case, with these short-term rentals that we still have, two out of the three of our triplex that we still have this with are actually midterm. So we've kind
Okay.
of converted them to midterm, which is like travel nurses that are at the hospital right down the street. And I did kind of have that in mind when I was buying it too. Like I knew that was a good place for travel nurse housing, and they stay for 3 to 6 months. So it's almost like a halfway between short term and long term, but you don't have to worry about it quite as much. And the tenants end up being excellent. So we've had success with it, but definitely risky. It's a risky strategy for sure. All right, gonna move on to flipping. Speaking of noise, this one I'm putting it at 5. I know there are people out there that have kind of formed a business, and over time they have made their flipping business more passive for them and hired out all of the work. But you don't just do that your first couple times out. I mean, certainly you are very actively, if not swinging a hammer, you're managing all the people that are um, managing contractors, trying to get it done. And speaking of stress, trying to be on top of everybody so that you don't every single second you're losing money, that you can't get this thing on the market again. So flipping, I think, is the most active you can be. And you're only as good as your last flip. You have to keep doing it to keep making money. It's not an equity play at all. So you just have to, if you want to keep making money doing this, you have to keep flipping and keep flipping. It was never really the strategy for me, to be honest. So you probably have more experience with it than I do anyway. Do you guys want to speak to that?
So I flip a lot, and I've been doing it for 20 years, and I love it. And I'll tell you the reasons I love it. But on your active and passive scale, I couldn't agree with you more. That's not passive income. It's called a job. And you need to spend a decent amount of time, in fact, quite a bit of time looking for the properties. If you don't do that, you are guaranteed to fail because it's not about the flip as much as it's about buying right. And so I'm in a business. I along with some partners own 3 large brokerages. We have close to 700 agents that work for us. So I have access to properties that a typical layperson wouldn't have. Were it not for that, I don't really know how making very much money at flipping happens. It can happen, but it's sure as heck not passive. So finding the property is actually the most time consuming part, and then managing relationships with contractors, etc., is a whole webinar in and of itself, which we could talk about at some point. So fabulous. I actually love it. It's fun. It is not passive income.
Ian, do you agree?
Yeah, I'm terrified to even touch this one. So, Shannon, thank you for being the spokeswoman for me. I will kindly pass the baton for the rest of eternity to you on flipping.
If it's fine. If you run into a great flip, let me know. I'll
And
play.
four, I know who to call.
That's great. Okay, here we have a limited partnership, something we are very familiar with. And I think I speak for the three of us when I say finding limited partnership, which means being a passive investor in a syndication or a large group investment, is kind of like finding the holy grail of real estate, in some ways, because you kind of get the benefit of not having to be active. Obviously, you have to vet the team and make sure that they have a good track record and are people of integrity, first and foremost. But beyond that initial just finding the right group to invest with and making sure the deal is something that you're interested in, it really is about as passive as it could be, in my opinion. um, you're receiving updates maybe monthly or quarterly depending on the group. You're reading the updates. You're getting distributions to your bank account of choice. And then you get a K1 at tax time. So do you guys agree? I mean, or what do you have to say about that?
There's only one bit of active that I think you left off, and that
Okay.
is discussing your depreciation on your K1 with your accountants to minimize your taxes.
Oh,
So for
okay.
me,
Yeah.
it's absolutely fabulous that you get to take advantage of all the beauty of depreciation to make your beautiful passive investment even more profitable.
That's
Mm,
good. That's
that
good.
is good. For me, the partnership gave me access to assets and deals that I never, ever would have had the credibility or net worth to be able to pursue on my own. I mean, from a mathematical standpoint, I never ever would have come close on at least the residential stuff that I had done on my own without this limited partnership model. So, yeah, it really just all comes down to the math, and taking advantage of the appreciation, cash flow, tax benefits, and then the amortization when you're leveraging it with some light debt. Um, yeah, it's a game changer for sure.
Ian, I love what you said because you're taking advantage of appreciation, which is beautiful, and you're taking advantage of depreciation.
Right.
And unlike buying your own, let's just say a buy and hold, or that's certainly true with short-term rentals and flipping as well. If you have a market correction on any of those other strategies, a buy and hold short-term rental or a flip, most likely you're going to have a mortgage in your name, right? Do we agree?
Hmm.
And again, I'm the oldest one on this call, but I lived through 2006, 2007, 2008 when there was a massive market correction, and I owned properties and had mortgages on properties where the value fell enough that my mortgage amount was higher than the value. So when you have market that corrects dramatically, and most of us know that the world cycles, you are left in those other scenarios holding a liability that can be worth more than the value of your property. When you're in a limited partnership in a syndication or, the types of things that we do, that whole stress and risk is taken off your head.
Mm.
So as the market cycles down, you don't have that liability on your head. All you need to do is wait until the market cycles out. And, almost always real estate prices come back and go up from where they were. So I think it's a really important distinction that, understanding that you get the depreciation value in your tax returns while the property is appreciating. If for some reason market cycles cause it not to appreciate, you're never going to have the risk of owning a property where you have a mortgage on your head that is over the price of the property.
Yes. And one more thing I want to mention on this is like it's the perfect way of being able to get into an investment without having to have loads of experience. You don't have to build your way up to the experience level where you can do a great flip or you can have like this amazing buy and hold because you've figured out how to market and get the best deals and negotiate and maybe on your fifth or 10th or 15th deal you're finally doing it correctly. You're finally getting a home run. I mean, you can have a home run on your very first deal because you're investing with a team who's done it so many times. So yeah, it's a win. I
Yeah,
mean,
people get to go to work and work in the area where they have domain expertise and leverage our domain expertise in this end of the world. And that way they can really have the advantages of both.
Absolutely. Well, you would think that's the end, but actually there's one more. So here we have private money lending. I wanted to put this on here because I'm putting it at a high one. I am like purposely putting it above limited partnership, but it's very similar in the way that it's very passive. Private money lending is where you're lending some piece of the equity that's for somebody else to buy a deal, and for them to profit on the deal, and then they just give you back your money maybe in 3 or 6 months plus a return, which is usually agreed upon ahead of time. I mean, easy peasy, right? And you get your money back a little bit sooner. The part where it's a little bit active is that because you're getting your original investment back sooner, you kind of have to keep finding places for it to go. That's one of the maybe the cons of this one. Maybe you found somebody who constantly has deal flow, and that's great, but maybe not always. And you kind of want to keep that money rolling, and that's kind of the whole point of this is like to keep it actively investing and growing each time. But it is a great strategy. Do you guys have experience with this one?
I do a little bit of it and I do love it when it works. It is passive mailbox money. Um, as you said, finding the deals is a bit of a job in the same way that finding buy and holds and flips can be a job. The other piece of it that makes me edge it a little bit farther up the passive scale is I spend a decent amount of time and money on each deal working through them with attorneys because every deal is different and every state is different. Every deal is different. The collateral is different. So there is no one size fits all contract for private money lending. So you do need to, again, with that term, domain expertise, but you need to have some domain expertise in doing this so that you can protect your money. It's not completely a no-brainer.
Yeah, but something to look into. And I feel like, with all of these, that each one of these could be right for somebody because it's just they like to furnish things. Like that's just one part of some of these niche investments that might speak to you, or that you enjoy working with tenants, or whatever it is. So there's again no one size fits all, but also kind of cool that there are so many things to choose from in the world of real estate investing, and they all can work and they all can produce some great returns. Do you guys have any final thoughts?
Isn't the world of real estate fun because it's just a big playground and you can pick whichever piece of playground equipment you like. And I like what you said about some people really get joy out of furnishing and making something beautiful, and some people get joy out of playing with the numbers and building spreadsheets. And so real estate is just amazing. So many opportunities.
Yeah, that was a great breakdown, Hilary, and I liked it because it shows that each sort of asset class is scalable in its own right. And yeah, that is the beauty of it, isn't it, Shannon? It's like it's no one size fits all, but I feel like everything on that chart is applicable to 99% of the investors out there. So well done.
Yeah. And if you're young and ambitious, or just ambitious, go do a flip. I mean, why not? Go try it. Um, all right, guys. Well, thank you everyone for joining us, and especially thank you to my co-hosts who were absolutely wonderful. This is where you can find us. Thanks for joining us. Have a great night, everybody.